With Central Christian Center here in Joplin, Missouri at 410 Virginia. Also Saturday Night Live Life Recovery Ministry here also at the church. Today I'm here to share some information with you. Hopefully it will be an encouraging word because this is an encouraging word from Doug. So hopefully it's an encouraging word to you and for you that hopefully that it'll help you in some way. Today I'm going to be talking about he who fights with monsters might take care lest he thereby becomes a monster. A lot of times we're afraid that people that deal with hard things can become a monster, and that's kind of what I'm talking about here today. Yes, that can happen, but my real question here is, if we don't go ahead and deal with the hard things of life, if we don't go ahead and deal with the monsters in our life, the big monsters, the little monsters, if we don't deal with them, if we don't contend with them, if we don't get in the arena and deal with this stuff, then what's going to happen? What are we going to be? How are we going to turn out? How are our families going to turn out? How are our towns, our country, our churches going to turn out if we don't deal with it? The rest of the title is Nietzsche said that if we stare into the abyss stares back into us, and that scares the fire out of us sometimes because we're thinking that we're going to see how bad we are. We're going to see our dark shadow. And the fact of it is that may be very true. But my point today here is we need to recognize those places in us, because until we recognize them, we can't do anything about them. If we run and hide, if we avoid, if we pretend that it's not in us, then we can't deal with it. We can't resolve it. We can't work on it. We can't overcome and adapt. And besides that, a lot of the philosophers, and including Jesus, refers to this, and that these things that are in us, he's put in us to help us, to empower us, to bring us into the place we need to be. We just have to learn how to harness it, how to direct it, how to channel these things in healthy directions. That's part of our uniqueness that God has given us. Anyway, we're going to be talking about some of these things. Hopefully I can get this message out before I run out of time. And but my real point here is, if we don't deal with those monsters, if we don't deal with those dark places in us, if we don't deal with our own fears, then we're going to be living and operating in fear. And how does that work out for us? What does that do to us? You know, is bliss, is ignorance, is ignorance bliss? You know, they say ignorance is bliss. Is that really the truth? Is ignorance bliss? Not knowing what's pushing us around, what's driving us. You know, many times, particularly in my earlier past, I said, why do I keep doing the same things over and over? Why do I do this? Why do I act this way? Why do I feel this way? What's going on? And if we're not willing to look, if we're not willing to step into our scared areas, our fearful areas, then we stay pushed around by that stuff. We're going to be talking a little bit about courage here in a little bit too. Someone says that in knowing nothing makes life to be most delightful. Is that really true? Knowing nothing? Now, I know Schultz, the old TV shows, I know nothing. And that was his way of trying to survive with the prisoners and get along, okay? But the fact of it is, that can get you killed or severely diminished, or what we call nowadays anxious and depressed, pressed into a box, overwhelmed, sick, tired, wasted away. Yeah, I know it's hard. It's hard to rise up and take on our responsibilities and contend with what's in front of us. But the alternative is to sink into that swirling abyss, that nihilistic sense of hopelessness and helplessness. I know not everybody's like me, but I'd rather go down fighting if I'm going down. But if I'm fighting in most of my life, not all the time, there's a balance to everything, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But those things that I thought was impossible turned around because God's there to help us. He's there to help us, to lead us, to guide us, to show us, to enable us. I'm going to read Psalms 23 here in a minute. And I think that's what that's talking about. So how is this ignorance is bliss working out for you? If you're believing that it's working out for you, you're in worse shape than I thought. But there is a balance to everything. I mean, we have to have some self-reliance, and we have to have some self-sufficiency. We have got to be vulnerable. We got to have the right amount of vulnerable. We got to have enough assertiveness to deal with things. Too much of anything causes disorder, okay? And that affects us. And that's one of the things that we're trying to learn when we're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. And then we're starting to try to learn how to navigate through life. And then later on, we're trying to learn how to negotiate our way through life, and then how to grow and achieve and develop. And then hopefully start a family and have a family and raise a family and pass on those things that we've learned. And that's one of the biggest difficulties we have maybe in the world and in the United States, is not having those family ties. And so many fractured, torn up lives, families. But let's go on. One of my crucial points here is we can't deal with what we're not aware of, because the first step of all recovery is becoming aware. The reason why we sink into the abyss is because we're hiding from the problems, we're denying the problems, and so we ignore it. We stick our head in the sand, so to speak, the virtual sand, and try to pretend that things are not happening. But it doesn't make things go away. In fact, it can make things a whole lot worse. One of my favorite scriptures from long ago, back when I used to teach divorce recovery, and this has been probably 30, 40 years ago. And this was a scripture, and this is out of the Old Living Bible. Jeremiah 6:14 says, "If you can't heal a wound by saying it isn't there." You can't fix something by saying it's not there. Denial is not going to work. Okay. John 8:31 and 32, and everybody's familiar with this, and that is that, and we're talking about the truth will set you free. Verse 31 says, if you abide in my word. Okay, the key word here is getting plugged in. You have to get plugged into the truth, into his word. Abide, live with. Not just touch it once a week or less than that. But once a week's better than none at all. I'll grant you that. But we're talking about here, anything that you want to learn, you have to consistently partake of it. You have to continually practice it. I remember when I was going to college, they didn't teach me how to take notes in high school, and I don't know if I'd have taken any if they did. But when I went back to college after being off for several years, 10 years or so, I realized that I couldn't even understand my notes, and so somehow I figured out I needed to review my notes every time I went to class. So if I could get to class 5 minutes early, I sit down and go through my notes. And you know what? By the staying current with my notes, I understood my notes. I didn't have to relearn everything because I was relearning everything every week. But I didn't have to figure out what my notes meant because I knew what they meant because I did it before every class. And I could go right through my notes. And when it was time for the final, I just perused through my notes and double checked things, and I was ready to go. That was abiding. That was living in my notes. I was up to speed. I didn't have to go back and try to dig out stuff like I used to try to do, try to figure out what the teacher's going to ask, and I already knew because I already had the notes down. Anyway, that was a side note. So John 31 that I just read, if you abide in my words, then the truth, my truth, will abide in you, and you'll be my disciples. And then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you or make you free. It will navigate you through life and help you to miss a lot of the traps and the snares of this life, because it's chocked full of them, in case you didn't know that. So if we try to live our life by see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, then that means we're trying to just check out. The fact of it is, we have to be checked in to deal with life, to navigate, so we know where we're going. I don't know why. The other day I came up with some research on why the can't even think of the ship that hit the iceberg. I lost that. Anyway, some of the reasons why they give the reason why the Titanic sank was because one is they weren't able to get to the binoculars because somebody locked them up and they couldn't get to them because a guy went on leave and they didn't have them. They didn't communicate the message that came in about being aware. Another one was they got the person that was driving the ship down in at the engines got nervous. Instead of going one direction, he went into the iceberg instead of away from the iceberg, according to this information and research I had. And there were multiple reasons. Another one was they didn't have enough lifeboats, and then the lifeboats didn't even get filled with people. I think they were like only 60% full of people. So there was just multiple mistakes. It was one of those perfect storm situations, and it doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to be overwhelmed with stuff if we'll go ahead and be aware. Oh, one of the things, they scrimped on the metal they used for brads that hook the metal sheeting together, and so when they hit, they weren't of the metal that they needed to adhere and hold, and they popped, they broke. So it was multiple things, multiple scenarios, and sometimes that happens to a lot of us. But even in the midst of that, God It wants to rescue you. He's there for you, whether you believe it or not. All right, Psalms 23. The main thing I want to address here is out of verse 4. It says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Though I walk through the valley of shadow of death. You know, it's interesting because we're going to have shadows. Now, what we're going to talk about here, even though this passage and this psalm is used a lot at funerals. In fact, I have started using it again because I have a deeper understanding of this psalm. But it's really talking about life and not death. I mean, death, it mentions death because death is a part of life, but this is about life. Okay, so open up your thinking here a little bit and see if you can grasp what I'm talking about. So the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. You know, I don't have any more wants anymore. If we're really being guided by the shepherd, I'm closer than I've been. Okay, and it's a hard struggle learning how to allow yourself to be led by the shepherd that knows how to take care of us, and Jesus, God, is our shepherd, our shepherding force. Said he makes me lie down in green pastures. That means he knows the places to go. He knows the safe places, the serene places. He leads me beside the still waters. That means sheep get scared around noisy waters, but he knows where it's safe. I took the kids to the river yesterday, and of course they want to go right where it's swift. I say, now you got to be careful what that's going to be doing, you know, and you know, Quincy is 4, and she's way too brave, and but we're coming along. So, but anyway, a side note. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness. He knows the way to go to guide it. He knows the safe. He knows the best route for us, and he does that for his namesake. And I went into the Hebrew to find out. I wanted to know a little more what it meant by his namesake, and the translation of that word was purpose, his intent. He leads us for his purposes, to help, to bless, because he desires and wants us to be blessed. He wants to be led, and he'll lead us out of trouble. But I tell you what, he wants to lead us away from the trouble. What do you think about that deal? That'd be all right, right? Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Yeah, even though it's the scariest time, okay, he's there. He says, I will fear no evil. This is David speaking. I will fear no evil. Thou art with me. When you have that protecting force, you know, I taught here a few weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, about our perception changes when we are not alone, when we're with somebody. The hill doesn't look as steep. It doesn't seem as scary. It doesn't seem as dark. Not because it changes the way the hill is, or the darkness, or even the temperature, how hot or how cold, but because we're with somebody, we have a perceptual difference according to scientific research. Okay, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The rod is a weapon. The staff is a guiding tool to help us, and they comfort me. The weapon's not used on us, and the staff, the guiding tool, is used for us. They comfort me. You prepare us a table before me in the presence of my enemies, and you anoint my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Man, I was just thinking about this, and it was, you know, he can set us down and right in the middle of our enemies, and you can have lunch and be okay. And I also had a thought that even, and I've even had this happen, where you even let your enemies in and you feed them, try to take care of them, and that affects them. And God can do that. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. What did Nietzsche mean by when you stare into the abyss and the abyss stares back at you? And it's so many times people have been afraid, because I used to have this, I used this sentence stem, and I still use it some. If I were willing to see what I see and know what I know, that scared the tar out of people. Hey, it made me nervous too. But it also set me free. It also set the other folks free because it helped us to go ahead and deal with stuff. And staring into the abyss, into the darkness, into our fears, into that shadow side of ourselves, that we're able to have the courage to deal with our own dark stuff. And that dark stuff, channeled in the right direction, can be good stuff, beneficial stuff. One of the translations, which was part of the title, Nietzsche was German, and another translation, other than the one I just read, was he who fights with monsters might take care lest he therefore becomes a monster. If we don't deal with the monsters in our life, what becomes of us? Slaves, right? Victims, vulnerable children. Not that we have to be harsh and mean, but we can have courage and strength, and maybe even a little monster ourselves, but we have it controlled. We have it dealt with. And it only comes out unless absolutely, positively necessary. It goes on to say, and if you gaze for long into the abyss gazes back into you. I like what Jordan Peterson says. He says that if you look into the abyss, you look long enough, you look deep enough, you'll find light in there. That light is what sets you free. And that's what Jesus said in John 14:6. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Okay? And he said, I am the light of the world. We can't be contained by our own fear. We need to recognize our fear and then deal with it. Many years ago, I tried to make a deal with myself, and I think I've done pretty good with it. Is when I recognize my fear, that's my direction I'm going to go for. I'm going to address my fear the best I can. Hey, I've been pushed around with fear. I thought those things I feared were giants that were ready to destroy me. But I found out, for me, yeah, they were strong things. They were a force that I had to deal with, but they weren't giants. The things I was seeing were enormous shadows because I was so afraid I didn't want to turn around and look at them. You got to face what you're going to fight. So, light destroys darkness. It eradicates it. It destroys it. Bring the light. Deal with the light. Joseph Campbell says this, and I really like this. He says, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. I'm going to say that again because I kind of stepped on it. Joseph Campbell, he says, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Courage is so important, and I'm way over time here, but I wanted to read this Joyce Meyer's quote about courage. It says, "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is moving towards in the presence of fear. Do it afraid," she said. Embrace courage in the face of fear. Just because you're afraid doesn't mean that you're not courageous. Okay? In fact, Eddie Rickenbacker, which I researched him again because many years ago I'd heard about Eddie Rickenbacker, and maybe some of you know him. He was a soldier that was in World War I that taught the Ivy League pilots, because he hadn't finished. I don't think he finished grade school, but he taught them how to fly those planes, and he shot down more. He was the number one ace for World War I. And one of the courageous things he did was he was with some other soldiers and got shot down, a crew of 5 or 6 or 8, I don't remember, but they were stuck for 24 to 25 days floating in a rubber life raft, and they survived on the rain and fishing, and one of the best part of that story is that I drew my memory to him was that they thought they were going to die, and a pelican, I think it was a pelican, some sort of bird, landed on his head, and he was able to reach up and catch it. They ate it. They used the bones for hooks, and they just used that. But the fact of it was, he said this is a quote from him: "Courage is doing what you are afraid to do. There can be no courage unless you are scared." I thought that was pretty good. Ernest Hemingway said, "Courage is grace under pressure." And I'm going to close with this, and this is Winston Churchill says, "Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen." It takes courage to deal with stuff in life. You have to be willing to be brave. Just because you're brave doesn't mean that it'll always work out, but it means that you were in the arena and you tried. And if you keep trying, you will win. And if we deal with the dark stuff and we let God help us and we pray for His direction, His Holy Spirit guidance, then we can set ourselves free from those fears and those things that hold us back, and we can deal with it. So today, I just want to say, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and may His face shine upon you and give you His peace. Till next time, make healthy choices and be in church Sunday. God bless you. Till next time.